Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin our program now. Welcome. I'm Sarah Cott, Senior Vice President of Programming at The Hill. Thank you to everyone joining us in the room today and online for our event, Securing the Grid, Powering the Gulf South Region. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Entergy, for their support of this discussion. Demand for electricity is growing at the fastest pace in decades, driven by growing industrial production, heating and cooling, vehicle electrification, and the rapid expansion of data centers. At the same time, extreme weather events such as heat waves and large storms are projected to increase frequency and intensity, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. Last fall, Hurricane Helene caused more than 5 million customers in the southeast to lose power. More recently, a massive outage in Spain and Portugal left nearly 60 million people without power, with trains, traffic lights, ATMs, phone connections, and internet access failing across the Iberian Peninsula. Authorities there are still searching for answers, while the US officials heed the warning signs. The need to bolster and modernize the US power grid has never been greater. What is needed to achieve a resilient power grid that also balances sustainability, clean energy priorities, customer affordability, and creates jobs? The Gulf region plays a critical role in the country's energy and economic security. What progress has been made as we near the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and what vulnerabilities still exist? Join the Hill, Congress's trusted source for news, for this special program in New Orleans, where we are gathering leaders in federal and local government, industry, and energy solutions to discuss the current energy landscape and opportunities for growth. What's needed to ensure a reliable energy future for our communities and country at large? Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. If you're with us here in the room, please turn your phones to silent. Of course, you may join the program on social media. You can follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram at the Hill Events using the hashtag HillEnergy. And with that, I am happy to introduce our moderator today, Julia Manchester, National Political Correspondent at The Hill. She is joined by Eric Circumetta, the Vice Chairman of the Louisiana Public Service Commission. Welcome, Julia. Welcome.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, good morning, everyone, and good morning, Commissioner. Thank you so much for being here today. Certainly a lot of ground to cover. As Sarah said, we know that when it comes to renewable and non-renewable energy, we're certainly entering an interesting period of time in terms of strengthening the grid, not only here in Louisiana, across the country. So let's start with how the Louisiana Public Service Commission is strengthening it. What are the priorities there?
Well, Louisiana undertook a pathway to grid resilience I would say about a year ago, or maybe a little bit longer through the process, and agreed to work with Entergy on a $2 billion investment in grid resilience for not only distribution mechanisms, but also for the transmission grid, recognizing that the important thing is the ability to bounce back after critical weather events. And looking at if we can keep effectively, if we can keep the poles up and the transmission poles up, the wires are easier to restore than moving up with the heavy poles. So that process has been underway for a bit and is moving along with speed.
Excellent. And I mean, we know that right now we're entering hurricane season. I think there's supposed to be 13 to 19 named storms. We know that recently, unfortunately, the Gulf has taken the brunt of past hurricane seasons. So you talked about strengthening those power poles and sort of that part of it, but what's needed really to achieve a resilient power grid that also balances sustainability and clean energy priorities? We know that that's obviously a topic as well.
Right. Well, obviously, we're looking at a mixture of transmission lines. I don't want to ignore you folks over there. I got to turn it back to you. So I'm going to look around and practice my Buckley School of Public Speaking. We're looking at the durability of a transmission grid more than anything, because we're looking at transmission towers, some of which are bordering on an antique, but we also have some of the newest transmission towers, courtesy of previous hurricanes, that are highly durable. And so, you know, we want to get the best value out of these for the ratepayers. We don't want to just go and tear down transmission towers, but we want to be in a position to replace them if they go down. And I know that sounds a bit horrid if you think about it, but the reality is you don't go around just tearing up infrastructure if it's providing a value and you're getting your money's worth out of it. So we want to make sure that the companies are in a position to do this. In the first Trump administration, we were near the end of it in a position to modify the Enabling Act of the FERC to include investor-owned utilities in the same funding as they would do through FEMA that they do for co-ops, and for the purposes of transmission. And I think that's an important element for us to look at, as to make sure we get money on the ground quicker to where we can prepare and we can have that, you know, the supply chain ready to repair and do this. Because look, we're going to get hurricanes. They have not stopped coming, and they're not going to stop coming. They're part of nature's way of balancing pressure systems in the universe, right? We're got them, and we're going to get them. And it's always about, you know, being able to deal with them and being able to respond. So we need supplies and we need mechanisms. We're going to need to build transformer manufacturing facilities. Been in discussions with the Pentagon about the need for building one possibly in Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, and making our need for transformers an American-based mechanism. So, you know, we can do things to make ourselves more reliable for ourselves, but we have to do it in a sense of urgency, and we have to do it in a way that's meaningful for our consumer.
Now, I understand that Louisiana is already working on and has begun a $2 billion project, basically in grid improvements. Does that include some of the initiatives you just chatted about, or, you know, what else does it include?
Well, the Louisiana initiative is to change out some older transmission poles, also changing out a lot of the distribution poles. We're identifying, you know, transmission mechanisms of like poles and wires, and to some degree, some older transformers that are more susceptible to damage, and do that. In fact, we had a meeting with one of our local parishes where they indicated that they identified 1,000 poles that needed to be replaced. We actually looked at it, and we identified 7,000 poles that needed to be replaced, and we put that into movement to replace 7,000 poles. So we are actually replacing actual, like what people would notice as regular utility poles in their neighborhoods, as well as certain transmission poles or towers that are out in the mechanism.
And you talked about local parishes and communication there. What has the feedback been in terms of how they're, you know, looking at the grid, how the grid is impacting them? What do they want to see improved? What's working for them?
People don't want their power to go off. I know that's the easiest way to put this. When I first became a commissioner, probably before some of you were born, about 17 years ago, we would have outages that would last, you know, 18, 20 days. Now we have outages that last maybe a day or two after storms. And, you know, we are in a position to where we have improved the response of our utility system, our 3 investor-owned utilities, and our cooperatives. But we've done such a good job on this through our commission and working with our utilities that it is a regular demand of, why is the power going out? And so we just have to tell our folks that they have to be patient, and we will make sure that we work with our utilities to get this done. I think that a prime example of this is Louisiana's program of encouraging linemen from around the country to come to Louisiana and help us restore our mechanism. We have an open payment plan with our utilities to make sure that we encourage the folks to come here and fix our grid. There's only about 35 to 40,000 linemen or workers in the country. Louisiana has a few thousand in place, but we have to go under a mutual aid mechanism to get people to come to Louisiana. And so one of the ways we get them here and we get them working is the commission guarantees that these utilities will recover the expense of paying these people to get them here, and to make sure they get paid, we do it through a storm recovery mechanism that we would hope we can get some extra help through the Stafford Act mechanization or modification. Other states do not do that, and there have been elongated periods of recovery in other states because of their failure to accomplish the same goals. And I think that it's as an example that they could learn from this mechanism and improve response and restoration mechanisms.
How long does it take to get the linemen from other states to Louisiana? I mean, are we talking in just the aftermath of a storm, in preparation? What does that process
Well,
look
if you've
like?
seen on weather maps, they do the cone of predictability. To their credit, utilities in Louisiana have crews already moved into Louisiana before the storms land. And they'll bring in probably, if you want to look at it as a hypothetical, they might move in 30% of what they anticipate they'll need outside the cone of predictability. And it's about housing, it's about a workforce placement. And then as it looks like they anticipate they'll need more folks, they will bring more folks in. But these guys, you've seen them on the highways if you live anywhere south of the Mason-Dixon line and even further south of the Mason-Boudreaux line. You will see trucks along the highways, and you will see them moving south. And whether they're going to Florida or Georgia or Alabama, Mississippi, wherever they're going, you will see these trucks in caravans just moving. And so they respond very quickly. So within hours versus days, they're on their way here because the call goes out. And so Louisiana responds to help our neighbors, and our neighbors respond to help us.
Right, and your neighbors that are obviously also impacted by hurricanes as much. I'm from Florida myself, so I understand that. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how the commission is leading Louisiana's utilities. How are you providing the lowest electrical rates possible to consumers?
Well, we put strong demands on our utilities to achieve these goals. We hire what I see as the best economists in the country. I think we hire the best attorneys in the country. And to be perfectly frank, we don't actually knuckle under to our utilities. We work this out. We've actually gone and had numerous cases of litigation against our various utilities. We've recovered in my 17 years, over $1 billion in rate credits from our utilities. We have been fair with our utilities. And, we understand their goals. We understand what they need, but we also hold them accountable. And we've trimmed off things that we do not think that the ratepayers should be paying for, and we work on that. But what we've also looked at is, besides achieving the goal of having extremely low utility rates in Louisiana through a regulated system that follows the regulatory compact of a traditional regulatory compact of zonal investor-owned utilities, we also look at the fact that we are our system is very quick. We are not gauged on being an impediment to new industrial development. Just in the last few years, we've had over $79 billion in new industrial development move to Louisiana. And that is not just AI. AI has been a very small part of that. It's probably been about $10 to $14 billion. And we have about $200 billion of new industrial development coming to Louisiana. Steel manufacturing, chemical manufacturing, forestry products. They come here because we have low rates. They come here because we have a very, I would call it, open and notorious regulatory process that will get them up and running. And I think that, we are in a pathway to having something that will build more power plants, and we will build gas plants, and we will build nuclear plants, and we will do so with the help of new industrials that come here and help pay for these systems.
You mentioned AI being a very small part of it. I'm curious, do you expect that to change in the future as AI sort of grows its influence? And finally, just wanted to get your sense on if you see an exciting new trend or innovation that you're hopeful for in Louisiana that everyone should get on their radar.
I would like to see any industry come to Louisiana. I'm agnostic because I look at this as the opportunities for people in my state is to help people, because Louisiana is a poor state. And I look at ways as an elected official to find ways to help people get employment and look at ways to moderate poverty in my state. And look, somebody once told me that the surest cure for poverty is a paycheck. And we want to make sure that people get opportunities to work. And I'll give you the example of Meta, for their facility in Richland Parish, which is in extreme northeastern Louisiana. The average income in that parish is approximately $35,000 a year. With this introduction of the Meta facility, they're anticipating it going north of $80,000 a year. So this is going to be a dynamic shift in the economy of Richland Parish and northeastern Louisiana. So I'm all in favor of that, particularly because they are paying the lion's share of their new 2,250 megawatts of gas plant that they're going to do. And hopefully they will be building more power generation in the future and expanding what they see can be done in Louisiana. Now, you know, do we see more coming? I hope so. I hope we have the Hyundai steel mill, which is $6 billion and 1,300 jobs in Ascension Parish. And that's part of an industrial park that we just built new transmission for, or authorized transmission for. And that's going to provide for support industries for Hyundai, but also other industries that want to take advantage of the power complex and the transmission complex in those facilities. And we are going to have facilities that will be able to take advantage of the breadth of renewables, the breadth of nuclear, the breadth of gas, and finding their way to, if they want to have net zero power, if they want to have baseload power, whatever the cocktail of megawatts that they're going to be searching for, Louisiana is going to find its way to provide that.
Commissioner, obviously we covered a ton of ground, a lot to look out for, particularly with industry coming to Louisiana. We love to end on a hopeful note, so thank you so much for joining us on
Nice to meet you.
stage
Pleasure.
today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much again to Commissioner Eric Skrmetta, Vice Chair of the Louisiana Public Service Commission. Next up, I want to, our CEO sponsor segment from Entergy. I want to welcome to the stage Sarah Cott from The Hill, as well as Entergy Chair and CEO Drew Marsh. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Julia, and welcome, Drew.
Thank you.
We're here in New Orleans, and we know that Entergy services the South Gulf region. Could you share a little bit about the unique position of this region?
Absolutely. And well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thanks for being here on the sideline of the Edison Electric Institute conference. It's exciting to be part of all of this, and there's a good room of folks here that are participating. So here in the Gulf South area, in Louisiana in particular, we've had Commissioner Skrmetta on. There is a lot going on. We have a lot of advantages, and they really span the game. It's kind of a long list, but I'm going to go through it. It starts with the fact that we are along the Gulf Coast. We have the Mississippi River. We have a lot of access to international markets, and so that gives our customers an opportunity to really enter into the world. We have supportive communities. Domestically, we have a lot of capacity in terms of highways and railways and other things to move our customers' products around the country. We have very supportive communities. They are still looking to make these large investments. As Commissioner Skrmetta was just talking about the Hyundai investment, the Meta investments, and there's others out there as well. And those are also building on a very large industrial infrastructure. For years people have been talking about hydrogen hubs. Well, we have a hydrogen hub already. There are folks that are doing hydrogen, creating hydrogen, consuming hydrogen, transporting, storing hydrogen, all on the Gulf Coast. There's pipelines that go from here in New Orleans all the way to the Houston area, which is our service territory along the Gulf Coast. So we have abundant infrastructure, and all of that leads to low energy prices, of which we are part of, and we were just discussing. We have some of the lowest electric rates in the country, but the overall energy costs are really low. And that means that we can compete very effectively in the global economy. And so people come to the United States to look at the largest market in the world, and then they look at the Gulf South for all of those advantages, and they decide to locate here. That's been driving our growth for quite a bit. Over the last several years, really since the end of the Great Recession, our industrial sales at Entergy have been growing over 5% compounded annually. And that's accelerating in the current environment. And part of that is all those advantages, and then you layer on some of the things that Commissioner Skrmetta was talking about, like the Meta investment. And our growth is actually really accelerating right now along the Gulf Coast.
So obviously resilience is a key part of what you're doing. And as you mentioned before, discussed, energy usage is growing and severe weather remains a key portion or a key issue for you. How is Entergy ensuring a resilient grid for communities it serves?
Well, as the commissioner was talking about, we are making a lot of investments, and I'll start with just the fact that, you know, obviously, as he said, you know, we have been experiencing storms for a long time. We are going to experience storms going forward. So we have continued to evolve the standards that we have for investment, and that includes, you know, going back to Katrina days, which the 20th anniversary is coming up. You know, we changed our standards to be more resilient after that storm. And that's because, you know, the original standards were built for a different day and age. You know, those were the days of the number 2 pencil and chalkboards and go outside and play and didn't have to need a computer for work, right? All those days are gone, and, you know, the grid was built to a lot of those expectations. Now, as Commissioner said, the expectations are different. And so making sure that our grid is resilient and reliable is really, really important. And he mentioned in Louisiana, we have a nearly $2 billion authorization from the Louisiana Commission to build resilience. That also includes New Orleans and Texas have authorizations now as well, so that as a company we have well over $2 billion of authorization to improve resilience going forward. And then we also have all of the new infrastructure that we're putting in place. You know, all the growth that we talked about, that is driving new generation needs, new transmission needs, and we are using that opportunity to drive resilience as well, not just in the materials and the designs that we're putting up, but where those investments are going. So we are effectively looping the west bank of the Mississippi River with our investments. We have proposals actually in front of the commission now in Louisiana and in Texas to basically almost loop the transmission grid west towards the north side of Houston. And that is further away from the coast and built at more modern standards, and that's going to provide quite a bit of resilience for our grid. Not to mention create a lot of capacity for growth. So those are examples of things that we're doing. There's quite a bit that has happened over the last 20 years, but much, much more to come.
So with resilience and being a core priority, how does sustainability and customer affordability fit into the picture?
Well, you know, our Entergy, and as I'm sure most companies, the customers come first. And so thinking about what it means for our customers from a reliability standpoint that we were just talking about, but also the sustainability and the cost effectiveness, the affordability elements of it. Those are all going to be top of mind. And so we have a couple different things that we're thinking about when it comes to just a general service. We have an ongoing continuous improvement program that drives costs lower every day. And so we've been managing our costs to a constant O&M level for about the last 6 or 7 years, despite all the inflation that we've had through COVID and everything else, and the growth that we've had in our sales and our business and additional assets and infrastructure that we've put in place. Our overall O&M costs have been basically flat. That has taken a lot of work from our teams, a lot of outstanding work to make sure that we don't sacrifice anything else while we're managing our costs more efficiently. And then the second thing I will say about cost management, particularly when it comes to resilience, is expanding the way that we think about costs overall. And that is, historically, we thought about how do we think about the value of resilience for our customers simply in the cost of the replacement of the infrastructure that's damaged. And so if you're thinking about it that way, it's not very cost effective to go replace a whole bunch of stuff because it doesn't cost that much to put up a new pole. If you're going and replacing a whole bunch of poles, you replace 100 poles, you might have only needed to replace 2 in the next 10 or 20 years. But when you add in the cost to the communities, and it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, you know, the effect of our society and its requirements around electricity, the cost of not having electricity have gone way, way up over the past 30, 40 years because of continued electrification. Nowadays, it's very expensive to have an outage. You know, before it wasn't expensive at all. But when you factor in the cost of today, and it's the lost work, the lost economic activity, the cost of spoilers, the cost of travel if you have to go out of town to avoid the storm and be out of town for a week, and all all those extra costs that are associated with the storm in an economic sense, well, those dwarf the cost of just replacing the infrastructure and making it more resilient. And so expanding that conversation and the commission has been a big part of that as well, as the city council in New Orleans and the commission in Texas. That has been a big part of changing the narrative and changing the conversation around how do we make sure that this resilience work is cost effective.
That's great, thank you. So for our last question, let's think a little bit about what's next. So local, state, and federal level, what do you see on the local, state, and federal level to support investment in the grid? And where do you see obstacles and opportunities?
Well, we see a lot of continued growth.
Okay.
And that is probably the first place where that's going to get the support for investment in the grid is from all the growth that we are anticipating. As I said, we've had industrial sales growth around 5%. Right now, over the next few years, in our outlook period, we're looking at 12 to 13% industrial sales growth. So a real step change in the growth expectation, and all of that investment. We are working hard to make sure that those customers help support the incremental costs of not just their effects on the grid, but all these other things that we have going on, increasing the transmission infrastructure, increasing the reliability and resilience of our grid to really fortify our grid. We want these customers to pick that part of it up. And I think that the next piece about it is making sure that we all work together. We call it around Entergy, we call it stakeholder engagement, but that is getting all of the parties to the table to talk about what we are going to do going forward. And that includes, the commission, of course, but it includes the governor of Louisiana and other jurisdictions. The governor of Louisiana will be here later today. It also includes community leaders, it includes our customers, it includes vendors who are offering goods and services locally. Engaging all of these groups in the conversation to make sure everybody understands what we're collectively trying to accomplish and what their role and what their opportunity is in that going forward. And that's proven to be very, very powerful. It's gotten a lot of people organized and aligned. And we're getting, all of our communities and our leaders are getting getting into this conversation, and we're very excited about where it's headed.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much today, Drew, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you to Thank you to Entergy for sponsoring today's show. Last week, Julia Manchester was able to sit down with two members of Congress. First, we'll hear from Congressman Randy Weber, a Republican from Texas, and Vice Chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Energy. Take a listen.
Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Just to jump right into it, I know that a few years ago, Texas was shaken by a very rare, strong winter storm that brought a lot of scrutiny over the state's power grid. I wanted to get your take on how important it is to strengthen the grid against these increasing climate extremes as we see, what seems to be more what we would used to call rare climate events.
Well, Julia, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and thanks for putting this on. Yes, absolutely. You're talking about Winter Storm Uri, February of 2021. I've grown up on the Texas Gulf Coast. I represent the first four counties of the Texas Gulf Coast coming down from Louisiana around the coast there. And I've never seen it, Julia, be 18 degrees on Galveston Island. And that's what it was. And quite frankly, our house was without power. Fortunately, I had a little backup generator in my garage I kept from my air conditioning company when I sold it. So I was able to put that into play. But we actually went and sat down with ERCOT and with the electric, well, we went and sat down with ERCOT, four of us from Congress, and said, look, we've got to strengthen the grid. We've got to make sure we've got more and more reliability. For example, NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, it's all about reliability. So in Texas, we're used to things, and you may not know this, Julia, but in Texas, we have every kind of wind problem, every kind of storm problem there is. Dust bowl, we've got hurricanes, we've got tornadoes, we've got some earthquakes. Of course, we have ice storms in the north, we have snowstorms. So for us, it's a big, big deal to make sure that Texas, the number one exporting state in the country, has a very, very reliable grid.
Well, what's so interesting to a lot of us, I think, outside of Texas who have never lived in Texas, is that the grid is very independent, I would say, from the national grid. I wanted to get your take on that. Why is it independent, and why do Texans want to keep it that way?
Well, Julia, did you not know that Texas was its own a republic, its own
Yes.
country at one time?
Do your own thing.
Why in the world in 1845 they joined the? I thought we should have annexed the rest of the country instead of joining the Union. But Texans are very proud about what we do, and quite frankly, we don't want the federal government coming in here and telling us how to do things. We want to have as much autonomy as we can. There was a move for two of our friends, Jasmine and the other freshman from I think it's from Austin or San Antonio, and then I think EOC signed on to force Texas to join the national grid. And we're like, no way, Jose, we're not going there. So Texas is very, very proud, independent, and rightfully so. We produce 65% of the nation's jet fuel in my district. We have 7 ports, more than any other member of Congress. We produce 80% of the nation's military grade fuel, my district, 3 LNG plants. So what we do is and by the way, the Port of Beaumont moves more military personnel and equipment out of the country than any other port in the United States. Texas is darn proud to have that record and be able to do that.
So post Winter Storm Uri back in 2021, what grade would you give the grid right now in 2025?
Well, it's really bad, as you know. One of the things that we've been paying attention to when President Biden was in office, of course, they had the largest infrastructure bill. They wanted to put 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. They did put it in that bill, and we don't have the grid to support that. So we're wanting to make sure that everybody understands that we ought to have nuclear. We've got 2 nuclear plants in Texas. I spent 4 years in the Texas House before I was demoted to Congress. And I had South Texas Nuclear Project in my district. So we believe in nuclear. We believe in wind. You probably know this, Miss Julia. Texas is the number one energy state. 20% of our grid's energy. About 5% of it is solar panels. We took that title away. It's number one in the country, I should say. We took that title away from California. So we believe in renewable energy. However, Winter Storm Uri taught us you better have some backup, reliable gas and fossil fuel. We're doing away with too many coal plants too soon when we could be actually using them until we get our grid built up. With all the talk about AI and all the stuff that's coming our way, we ought to be very, very careful about how we manage the grid.
So when it comes to those renewable versus non-renewable energy sources, how do you balance that going forward? Is it that Texas continues to increase its usage of nuclear energy, wind energy, et cetera, while having the non-renewable energy as a backup? What does that look like?
Well, for me, and I've thought about this for a long time now, for me, it would be better. Of course, there's ratepayers involved here. It costs more money, and that's the situation where we ought to have a lot of dispatchable energy, we call it, whether it's natural gas, whether it's nuclear, whether it's those kinds of things that we could pretty much bring online in a heartbeat. But while we weren't needing to do that, we could use wind, we could use solar. But when we have one of these extreme weather events, we've got to be able to bring it online quicker. To do that, we've got to have more natural gas plants. We've got to ease up on the permitting for natural gas pipelines. We've got to make sure that things get through the EPA, get through FERC, get through all of the agencies it needs to, so that we can build now. Because listen, we are way behind in our energy capability.
For the purposes of this event, we're focusing on the Gulf, drawing attention to the Gulf and some of the extreme weather events we've seen there. It seems that the Gulf, unfortunately, has been hit numerous times, repeatedly, with hurricanes over the past number of years. I guess how, has that at all, increased urgency to deal with the grid? I know that Winter Storm Uri certainly did, but does the increasing frequency of hurricanes also play into that?
Well, both of them do, Julia. And I tell you what we're doing. You're seeing our energy suppliers here in Texas put in more steel poles instead of wooden poles. There's a move to get as much of that infrastructure, if you will, below ground, so that we don't have to worry about trees taking down high wire lines or high lines, as much of it below ground as we can. So we're absolutely focused on the fact that, hurricanes are a problem for us. And here's the factoid about Randy Weber. Born and raised in a 20-mile radius, 71 years. My first hurricane was Hurricane Carla, 1961, I think it was. I was very, very young back then. And I've been through every hurricane on the Texas Gulf Coast since. So yes, it's important to us. Yes, we need to be very cognizant of that. And not only us, of course, from the federal level, Julia, but also from the state level, watching our state legislators do what they do.
When it comes to emergency response at the federal level, we have seen some cuts to FEMA. I wanted to get your perspective on how that has impacted Texas's response to some of these natural disasters and extreme weather events.
How much time do you have?
So a lot.
Oh, listen, like I said, I've been through so many hurricanes, and I've watched the three counties that I haven't been through a hurricane in Orange County. We picked up Orange County and redistricting, but I've watched the emergency management departments of Jefferson County, Brazoria County, and Galveston County. There's none finer in Texas. Why? Because, unfortunately, we have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff. What we don't like is the fact that it takes FEMA forever to reply. It takes Red Cross forever to get in here. And a lot of times Texans have gone and taken things in their own hands. I've been personally involved in Hurricane Harvey over the airport when we had volunteers bringing food in to a lot of the people who worked at the airport and couldn't get out and so and so and stuff like that. Red Cross showed up and they told the volunteers, "You got to leave now. We'll handle it." And the ladies that were working said, "Well, can't we do both? Can't we stand here and pass out food too? And can't we both?" And the Red Cross, for whatever reason, didn't want them around. So
Mm.
we're pretty disappointed in the Red Cross and FEMA's slowness. We watch for hurricane debris, Julia. FEMA has agreed to, by law, to reimburse the states, counties for hurricane debris removal, and it takes them sometimes years, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. After Hurricane Harvey, we were actually up in some of the counties in Northeast Texas, Dr. Brian Babin and myself, and that we're talking to county judges who said they haven't gotten their bill paid for hurricane debris removal for like going on 4, 5, 6 years. That's unconscionable. There's no call for that.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation about that there was some, divide between Republicans and Democrats over nationalizing the grid. But I am curious when we take a step back from that in terms of, emergency response in Texas, when it comes to the state legislature, when it comes to the congressional delegation here in Washington from Texas, how
Mhm.
bipartisan is that work? Do you find that it's, there's obviously bipartisan concerns, but is it easy to work with your colleagues across the aisle on this?
Well, it is in that kind of situation. Now, Julia, don't miss the fact that I said only two Texans, and then of
Right.
course AOC from New York had brought that idea up about making Texas join the grid. So I think you're going to find the majority of there's 38 members of Congress in Texas, 25 Republicans, 13 Democrats, as you know. So I think you're going to see most of them understand that Texas doesn't want to be, for lack of a better term, under the thumb of the regulatory agencies in the United States any more than absolutely possibly necessary. So I think you're going to see a lot of pushback on both sides of the aisle if that were to become a bill in Congress.
Finally, Congressman, I want to end on a slightly positive note. I just wanted to get your take on the role, what kind of role the Gulf region plays in terms of the country's economic and energy security.
Well, you already heard me say we have 7 ports more than any other member of Congress. Texas is the number one exporting state that I mentioned. And I think we're the number two economy. We might be behind California. Have to go back and look at those numbers. But again, I was in Mexico is our number one trading partner. Canada's our number two trading partner. I'm talking about Texas. And so for us, the economy is a big deal. Being able to trade is a big deal. Of course, we want to secure the border so that we've got good trade routes I worked on that in the Texas House and still working on it up here. So it's important for Texas to be able to trade, to be able to ship stuff across the seas, to do business with countries across the seas. It's extremely important to us. Texas, if you may know, and I don't have the current figures, has a huge surplus. I want to say it's $28 billion, which is actually more
Mhm.
more than the total uh, output of some of these states for all year long. So for us, it's an extremely important thing.
Yeah, it's a big state, has a big impact on the country. So we always are looking at
Yes.
Texas when we look to energy and climate issues, et cetera. Congressman Randy Weber, thank you so much for joining
Yes.
us.
Thank you, Julia, for having me.
Julia was also able to speak with Democrat Congressman Troy Carter of Louisiana on Friday. He represents New Orleans, where we're streaming from today, and is a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Take a listen.
And Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. Just to jump right in, we know that the Gulf Coast, really across the board, across the globe, we've seen these increasing extreme weather events, but unfortunately the Gulf Coast has been hit by a number of these very extreme hurricanes over the past few years. I wanted to get your take on the importance of strengthening Louisiana's grid against these increasing climate extremes. What do you think is needed for that?
Well, it's incredibly important when we think about the increased natural disasters that are happening all over the world. We know that Louisiana is literally in the eye of the storm. And shame on us if we don't learn from past storms. We know that storms come every year. We know their names. We know that they come stronger, they last longer, they provide more havoc in their past. But we find ourselves hurrying to recover and prepare each time for something that is very predictable. So the importance of investing in resilience and shoring up our bases and making sure that we are operating our power grid in the best possible way, going underground even where feasible. We know that it's not always feasible, largely because of the water tables that we have in Louisiana, particularly New Orleans. But where it's possible, we should look to fortify our grid either by strengthening the above ground or going underground where possible, which obviously will give us an opportunity to have less impacts with high winds that knock down our poles. The Inflation Reduction Act gave us an opportunity to really start moving in that direction, working closely with Entergy and CLECO and others here in Louisiana to fortify the grid. So critically important. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation now where there's some backpedaling as relates to that. And that simply is not good for the overall well being of the people in our country and certainly in the South.
You mentioned past storms. We are coming up on the 20th anniversary of maybe one of the most infamous storms Louisiana or this country has ever seen, and that's Hurricane Katrina. What lessons has Louisiana learned in the 20 years since Hurricane Katrina in terms of, hurricane response, but also recovery?
We learned that these storms don't care about your party. They don't care about your socioeconomic status. They don't care about how much money you have in the bank or where you live. We've learned that we have to take good note of what happened and then build on that for future storms. As it relates to Katrina, as we approach this 20th year anniversary, one that is very sorrowful with the lives that were lost and the pain that were caused, we've learned from that and we fortified our levees. And storms that have come since that time have not had as much of a devastation as they did with Katrina. And the lesson there is take good notes, invest resources. The money we spend on the front side, fortifying our levees, being resilient with our grid, being creative with how we create relationships with churches and nonprofits to have cooling centers, which I was very proud to, with community development dollars, to fund the very first in Louisiana that has become now a pilot program for the country on how we utilize solar to have cooling places because we know as many people are injured or die in the aftermath of the storm because of lack of power and heat than they actually do of the storm. So all that builds into the ability and the power of resiliency, of being smart, learning from the past and preparing for the future. So as we embark upon this 20-year anniversary of Katrina, we know without a shadow of a doubt that putting money into our grid, into our shore, into our floodplains have paid huge dividends.
So today in 2025, as we approach the next hurricane season, how would you rate Louisiana's infrastructure and storm response? What grade would you give it?
A B plus.
Okay.
I
Why
would give it a B plus. We still have work to do, but we have come a very long way. B plus bordering A minus because of the progress. Louisiana has been a very good student. It has done the preparation, and I think the understanding of investing in our shorelines, in our floodplains, and our levees are understood. We have great partners with our power companies who understand the importance of fortifying the grid. We have great partners with the Louisiana Public Service Commission, with our various agents and agencies around the state, CPRA and others that have worked tirelessly in a bipartisan fashion, I'm proud to say, to recognize the importance of fortifying the grid and keeping people safe. We still have work to do. We're not done. We have work to do.
Right,
So I'm a tough professor, so I don't give grades out easily. So a B plus is a pretty good grade.
Gotcha. So I want to hone in on that phrase you used, partnerships. And we know that public-private partnerships have been important for strengthening the grid. I know that Louisiana just announced 2 big projects with Meta and Hyundai plants. How Louisiana seems to now be a tech hub in addition to an energy hub. Talk about the impact of that and some of the benefits.
The benefits of that are obvious. We create jobs, we create opportunity. These things were all made possible because of the Inflation Reduction Act, which created opportunities for businesses to see Louisiana as a viable place. Hyundai, recognizing that the Inflation Reduction Act was a huge move for them coming to Louisiana. Our concern now, obviously, is how do we manage now the impacts of tariffs? And we don't know. That's still an unknown. We meet regularly with these individuals who are coming to town with Hyundai, Meta, and others. But we're very proud of the fact that Louisiana is open for business. It provides jobs, provides taxation. It gives us a stable economy, particularly in light of the massive cuts that are going on along the country. Now is the time that we really hone in and zero in on the fact that Louisiana, because of our close proximity to the water, to the ports, we're really a great place to situate.
You brought up tariffs, and I know that there's a lot of debate across the country about some of the tariffs President Trump has implemented, their impact. I know that you said that Louisiana's still trying to figure out the impact of those tariffs, how it will affect the energy sector in the state. But what are the effects we've seen so far, particularly with these partnerships?
They've been devastating. I mean, the reality is the uncertainty of the on again, off again tariff, the tariffs that threaten our partners who we've worked as close allies in the past, businesses that would want to situate in Louisiana, in America, are on pins and needles because these tariffs are taxes. And we can say that it's going to be on someone else, but the reality is taxes are paid by the person at the port. And then those taxes are passed on to the consumer. It's very simple. And I've tried to get people to a 101 lesson on taxation and to explain that a tariff is in fact a tax. And who pays for that tax? The person that's picking up the cargo at the port. In Louisiana, they pay for that tariff. That tariff is then passed on to the person who picks it up from the person who bought the container. And then that tax is passed on to the person that's at the cash register who's purchasing the goods or services. It's very basic. So the notion that somehow this is not going to get to the consumer is disingenuous at best.
So we have these tariffs taking place, but also we understand that there are cuts to FEMA or potential cuts to FEMA that could be coming. In a state like Louisiana, which obviously is no stranger to receiving federal assistance from FEMA and working with FEMA quite a bit during these natural disasters, particularly hurricanes, talk about the effect of those cuts going forward, especially as we're heading right into hurricane season.
Well, it couldn't be a worse time. Of course, it'd never be a good time to impact the very agency that provides resources to the people. The notion that somehow it's a good idea to even talk about reductions or elimination of FEMA as we enter hurricane season is a bit challenging to think that anyone would think that's a good idea. Let's go beyond just talking about it. The notion of removing the agency, diluting or dispersing the agency that provides the resources for individuals to recover, to rebuild, and to be prepared as we lean into hurricane season, I think is reckless and irresponsible. It has been demonstrated that Louisiana, particularly, and I'll start there, but it can be anywhere USA now, particularly with the onslaught of natural disasters that we see in places we've never seen them before. Mudslides, wildfires, tsunamis, you name it, happening, tornadoes happening in places that hadn't happened before. But Louisiana, we know they're coming. We can set our watches by it. And to think that we would dilute or disperse or get rid of FEMA is ridiculous. Now, I'd be the first to tell you that I have been a long advocate for advancing discussions about reform of the Stafford Act, reform of FEMA, making sure that we are much more agile, that we're learning from past mistakes, that we're building a stronger response team, that boots are on the ground in advance of the storm so we don't have to track them in after the storm. There are a lot of antiquated parts of FEMA, but none of it supports the demolition of it or the punting of it to states. Simply put, you cannot decentralize FEMA. You cannot have it broken into 50 states. It's a nightmare waiting to happen. I have been working closely with my colleagues in the Congress, Republican and Democrat, to push back against this, to really push for reform and not demolition. It is not the right thing to do. It's a very dangerous prospect at the worst time of all.
Congressman Carter, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
It is now time for our panel on economic development in the Gulf Coast. Please welcome Julia back to the stage, joined by Michael Mazzola, Executive Director of Future Use Energy Louisiana, Chandler Booth, Vice President of Education for the Louisiana Community and Technical College System, Michael Williamson, President and CEO of United Way of Southeast Louisiana, and Michael Hecht, President and CEO of Greater New Orleans Incorporated. Welcome all.
Good morning, gentlemen. I don't know about you, Chandler, but I don't think I've ever been on a panel with so many Michaels. So I'll be using first and last names to go to each of you, so don't worry about that. You know, a common theme we've talked about today, obviously energy, but it's not lost on any of us in this room that yesterday was the first day of hurricane season, and we're approaching the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, which had such a dire impact on many here in New Orleans. Michael Williamson, I want to go to you first on that. I know that you've worked a lot with ALICE households, more commonly known as asset limited, income constrained, employed households. I wanted to get your sense of why strengthening grid infrastructure is so important for them, especially as we're going into hurricane season.
Julia, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I know a lot of our colleagues in the room, our Entergy colleagues, know ALICE so well because they've been heavily involved in the report that we put out every year or so. But the harsh reality is in Louisiana, 1 in 2 households are considered ALICE. They're asset limited, income constrained, they're employed. They're doing the right things, and about 30+% of those households live above the poverty level, but below what it would take to actually survive in the communities they live in. And so they're especially vulnerable, during storms. And so when they lose power, they lose, opportunities to go to work. Often they lose food in the fridge. The things that we think about, maybe take for granted, Alice households are on the margin. So we believe that a hardened grid, more reliable energy infrastructure is essential to ensuring that Alice households can maintain stability during a storm so they can recover as quickly as the rest of us.
Absolutely. Michael Hecht, I want to go to you. What's the role of Greater New Orleans in developing Louisiana's economic development going forward?
So, when I started, I think had a pretty traditional view of economic development, and that it was just about marketing to bring in new companies to create jobs and wealth, and that strictly is true. But I think we've come to realize over the years that true economic development is much broader, and now we define it as creating the conditions where businesses want to risk their capital and people want to raise their families. And when you define it much broader like that, then you realize that you not only have to deal with things like taxes and incentive structure, but you also have to deal with quality of life issues like public safety, flooding and flood protection, youth recreation. And so now at GNO Inc., we still very much do work on the big projects like the Meta and the Hyundais, but we're also very big in things like we have something called the NOLA Coalition, which focuses on public safety and investing in our youth. We're involved on the national level on reducing property insurance so that the middle class and Alice households have a chance to actually make it. And we really believe now that economic development is about getting the opportunity, affordability, and quality of life all in alignment so that an entire community can thrive.
Michael Mazzola, I want to go to you. Talk to us about FUEL, that stands for Future Use of Energy in Louisiana.
So thank you, Julia. FUEL is a very large program that was authorized by the CHIPS and Science Act, but its impact is going to be measured in years. And FUEL is an innovation engine program in which we are one of the inaugural 10 that were awarded across the country. So Louisiana has a lot to be proud of, to be recognized as being one of the leading places in the country for energy innovation. We are a statewide program, and our partnerships include the folks on the panel here. So Chandler's on my governance board for FUEL, and Michael Hecht runs an organization.
We're 75% Michael's in the partnership.
Yes, that's right.
It's our safe word.
So the fact of the matter is that energy and the United States are synonymous. We're the largest energy producer in the world by far, but we also lead the world in delivering that energy at reducing carbon. In fact, we're the only net energy exporter in the world that has achieved that. And so we now recognize that that is a tremendous economic and competitive advantage for this energy industry that is here. And so we realize that the sky's the limit in terms of innovating in that space. And so we already have a number of startup companies that are coming out of our universities, and just frankly, innovators who are in this generational employment of more than 100 years working in energy. And so we know what we're doing here, and we're going to lead the world in terms of building carbon capture and utilization to turn CO2 into a valuable product that powers our chemical and energy industry.
Chandler, how are your 12 community colleges contributing to the workforce in the energy sector here in Louisiana?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for having me. And unfortunately, I'm not Michael, but after I leave here, I'm going to change my name to Michael, so we'll be the Michael duos. But so Louisiana Community Technical College System, as mentioned, 12 comprehensive community colleges across our state. We serve about 150,000 students annually and credential about 35,000 students in our state. Many of those in our high-wage, high-demand sectors. So as mentioned, powering the energy sector. That's not just from educating and training the line workers, that's also training individuals to work on our coast, training individuals in hydrogen and wind and solar as we continue to see that transition occur. We still are lock in step closely with our economic development partners and our business industry partners to understand their needs. So most of our skilled training is really focused around construction, manufacturing, IT, transportation, logistics, and healthcare. We offer all the way up to the associate's degree level, but we're seeing more and more students who need to be able, and families who need to be able to enter into a workforce training program that's short in nature. They're coming from looking for maybe stability to get into that middle class, and so they don't always have the time to get to the associate's degree. So we're making sure that whatever our industry partners are saying, whatever our partnerships with the Workforce Commission, our partnerships with LED, we're all understanding the data and understanding the needs, and we're making sure that we're able to stand up those programs across our state and those communities, and making sure that the rural communities also have access to the education and training opportunities.
Absolutely, and I want to stick with you, Chandler, for a second. Congressman Carter, as well as Michael Hecht, brought up the Meta and Hyundai partnership here in Louisiana. How are you currently training students to work at the AI data center and the steel plant?
Yeah, great question. So we were involved early on with conversations around Meta and the opportunity in which they were going to partner with Louisiana Delta Community College in the Northeast, and making sure that we were able to provide resources around electricians and construction workers, all the way down into the deeper of the IT sector. And so we were there to be able to make the investment so Delta could expand program, make sure it had the resources and the capacity, the faculty to teach those courses. And so today, Delta is currently producing workers for the future of that opportunity in IT, in construction, in welding, electrician, and the expansion. When you look into the Hyundai project, same as there, River Parishes Community College has really been at the forefront and been in partnership with those conversations from the beginning. They're working on expanding their training opportunities currently. They're focused on taking the current individuals to upskill them, and then ultimately looking at the recruitment pipeline to make sure that they're able to supply that resource in partnership with investing the infrastructure in Donaldsonville to make sure that we have a state-of-the-art training center there, as we know that transportation is always an issue for some, and so making sure that we have the world-class training facility lock in step with the project. And so we'll be focused on those heavily construction, manufacturing sectors as well.
Michael Hecht, I want to stick on the issue, or I guess the topic of the Hyundai and Meta partnership here. What's the economic impact of that for New Orleans and Louisiana?
Whenever people talk about economic impact, they talk about the direct jobs, the indirect jobs, maybe the induced jobs, which means getting a Chick-fil-A in the community, which is what people really care about. It talks about tax impact. I actually think the economic impact of these projects transcends that, and it gets to something that Secretary Bourgeois at LED talks a lot about, and the governor too, which is changing the narrative. The narrative in the Gulf South for the past couple of decades, I think if we're being honest, has been largely around other states, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Alabama. And the governor and Susan have said, we're going to get people talking about Louisiana. And the impact of that and the credibility that you get from having a Meta build their biggest AI center ever, or a Hyundai building a low carbon, their first low carbon steel facility in Louisiana, is difficult to measure, but we know that other CEOs and other site selectors and other board members around the world are going to say, maybe Louisiana can be Texas's kinder, gentler cousin, and a state that doesn't suffer from winning. And it's kind of like, I'm dating myself, but it's kind of like the old Avis commercials. We try harder, and I think that messaging is priceless.
Right. Michael Williamson, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about health equity, which I know is a big core mission of United Way. Give me a sense of the Louisiana's income gap, how it's impacting your work and bringing financial assistance to groups or individuals who may miss work for an energy blackout, or if food, for example, spoils in the refrigerator. I mean, I know that there's a lot of it's a kind of a domino effect, if you will.
Sure, and I can connect it back to the conversation around opportunities like Meta and Hyundai. Just once again, when 1 in 2 households in the state of Louisiana are struggling and can't meet their basic needs, 30+% are working. They're not considered poor. They don't qualify for a lot of the benefit programs that are out there. they're falling through the cracks, and it's expected that, you know, the nonprofit sector, United Way and others, are to step in and fill those gaps, and that's not sustainable. And that certainly has dramatic impacts on the health of an individual. We talk about social determinants of health, and basically we boil it down, if you're not right with your money, then your health's not going to be right. And so we know financial instability leads to poor health outcomes. But the flip of that is, when you see massive economic development wins are going to create lots of really good paying jobs, the question and opportunity we shouldn't lose out on is, how do you connect that 1 and 2 households that are struggling with these jobs and ensure they have the skills, both soft and hard, to be able to obtain those jobs. And I think that goes a long way to supporting the narrative change, which is, you know, we will be winning a lot more if Alice households are winning. And so we know the correlation between health, but I say all the time, we win when Michael and GNO Inc. and LCTCS and all our partners win if we're creating more jobs in an economic environment where all people can thrive. And it's our job as an organization and our sector, who works really, really hard to ensure that everybody has a shot at that opportunity. And that could literally, within a generation, flip the script.
And if I could just jump in, one thing is put an exclamation point on what this Michael said. The mission statement of GNO Inc. is to create a thriving economy and an excellent quality of life for everyone. And that for everyone is very intentional. We usually italicize it. And it's not just a moral or an ideological statement. It's recognizing that economically, if we are not allowing all of our citizens to maximize their values to themselves and their family and to the community, then we're underperforming as an economy. So there's actually a pure dollars and cents value rationale to addressing Alice as well.
Right. Mike Mazzola, I really want to, I guess, hone in on the issue of decarbonization. What does Louisiana's push for decarbonization look like?
Well, you don't have to take my word for it, but you could just ask the organizations that represent the Louisiana energy industry. In a brilliant op-ed piece, I have it right here, that was published with the CenterSquare.com, called CO2 Could Help Power Louisiana's Future. It's published on March 20th, 2025. It's a great summary of how we collectively, the industry, the public and private sector, recognize that delivering cost-effective energy to the world, to the country and to the world, as we are, along with Texas and Mississippi, net energy exporters to the country, but doing it at the lowest carbon emission footprint is a competitive advantage for us. And so we realize that the ability to do that is based on innovation and bringing academia, bringing business, and bringing entrepreneurs to build the next part of our energy economy, which is absolutely going to be small companies, tech startups, and innovation.
And speaking of academia, I mean, do your two groups work together a little bit? Is there a connection there?
Well, absolutely. Chandler, we know that there's tens of thousands of jobs that need to be filled here, and the fine Louisiana Technology and Community College system is the first place to prepare our citizens for those jobs.
That's correct. And so we are in communication often and frequent about those opportunities and making sure that our programs are aligned to the market demands and needs, and making sure that our graduates have the right credentials to enter that workforce immediately, and the opportunity for pathways for these individuals and their families.
Right. Michael Mazzola, you talked about decarbonization, and kind of very much reducing that footprint. What does the energy transition in Louisiana look like? I know, obviously, non-renewable energy is very important, but there is, I think, a push not only here, but across the country to invest more in renewable energy resources. What does that look like?
Well, you had, Julia, the Hill really brought professionals to this stage earlier, the CEO of Entergy, a member of the Louisiana Public Service Commission, and they are committed to delivering the energy of the future at an affordable and maintain affordability and reliability. So that means all of the above is now the recognized solution. Fuel works specifically in the energy sector that still delivers more than 80% of the world's energy. And doing the many things that we can in order to reduce that carbon footprint. But things like nuclear and renewable energy and bio, I mean, we're a tremendous agricultural state, and we have a lot to do with that. So fuel is particularly investing in our chemical industry here. When it produces carbon dioxide, we put it back into the plant to produce additional products that that people need. And another source for that is unused bio waste, for example. So there's a lot of innovation to go there, but it's always going to be an all-of-the-above solution.
Chandler, I understand that upskilling is a major focus of the students. Tell us about how you're upskilling the workforces for these two projects, the Hyundai plant and the Meta plant as well.
Yeah, so we're currently focused on trying to locate individuals who are looking for opportunities to upskill, and many of these individuals don't necessarily have the time to enter into a traditional 16-week program. So we've moved a lot of our programs to 8 weeks blocks where we can do evening weekends as well. So these may already be individuals who are working in some job, whether it is hospitality, tourism, whether it's in an industry sector already, but they want to upskill to be ready for job opportunities, for more financial income for their families as well. And so we're already launching training programs at both Delta and River parishes to be able to say, join us in the evening, on the weekends if you're already working. And we're working with Workforce Commission to understand what dollars are available out there to be able to support the needs of these individuals as well through these training programs. And so whether that's in construction, as I mentioned, welding, IT, laborers, skilled workers, we're focused on this opportunity. We know that if we don't upskill those individuals now, then we're going to be behind the 8 ball. And many of these are individuals who want to work. And so our big thing is trying to get people the opportunity to participate in the workforce and in the economy. And oftentimes it may not be those that are already on the sidelines. That's a whole another population in which we're working to help those individuals as well get their first credential, but many of the upskilling is helping these individuals get their 4th and 5th credential, which ultimately helps them expand their resources.
Right. And Michael Williamson, I'm curious, I mean, I would assume that a lot of people who benefit from United Way's service, a lot of communities you work with are some of those individuals that are trying to get off the sidelines.
Absolutely, and had the pleasure of working with Chandler and other leaders as we developed what now is considered the Louisiana one-door approach to workforce development. I think we've taken a massive step in reimagining our workforce system, partnering to make sure that individuals have the wraparound support so they can move through that pathway to what we call pathway to prosperity. Because to Chandler's point, folks want to work. The majority do. They're underemployed because they're having to make tough challenges, childcare, housing, transportation, all the things that are required to live, kind of a basic and sustainable life. It's challenging. So to be able to pursue a credential or change your career, upskill, requires time and energy and talent. And we often talk about, for Alice households who consider themselves to be poor, albeit not by the federal government standards, it's expensive to be poor, and it's a full-time job. They're working 1 or 2 jobs, and then when they're not working 1 or 2 jobs, they're trying to figure out what programs and services are available to help them put food on the table or get help with their utilities. And so there's an opportunity we have in front of us with all the economic development wins and reimagining our workforce ecosystem to place Alice, as we've done today, at the center of the discussion and ensure that they have those opportunities. And that's when I said we have an opportunity to change in one generation, the future generations to come. So.
Michael Hecht, you brought up a really interesting point earlier, and I mean, I'm originally from Florida, so I don't look at it from at the same perspective, but when looking at all the Gulf states, you talked about the importance of promoting Louisiana, making sure Louisiana is, getting recognized, getting noticed by the federal government, and also for business. I wanted to get your perspective more on that going right now.
I think if you were placing a bet back in the 70s on which state capital would be the one that would be the ascendant city of the future, whether it was going to be Baton Rouge or it was going to be Austin, Texas, you would have chosen Baton Rouge because of the oil and gas industry, because of the Mississippi River, because Austin was even sleepier, industrier than it is right now. Apologies. But what happened was, I think, a bit of a curse of the riches. We assumed that because we had, the God-given blessings of the river and of fossil fuels and of agriculture and aquaculture and even human culture, that we were always going to be dominant. And so what happened is that places that had less, like Houston, which had to dredge the canal, or like Mobile, who are now competing with in containers, they surpassed us. And I think what's happened now over the past couple of years, buoyed by this opportunity for energy demand going like that, but need for carbon going like that, for us to kind of go back to the future and become once and again a leading state driven by energy economically for the nation and the world, and create opportunity for our citizens, which will lead to the ultimate scorecard of economic development and I think political leadership, which is population, begin to come back. And I'm pleased to say that last year, now it was statistically driven by immigration, important point, but that Louisiana actually gained population by a very little bit for the first time in many, many years.
Wow.
And I do believe, kind of following Mike's vision and what we've heard here and supported by LCTCS, that this can be the moment where Louisiana begins to come back and get noticed by the rest of the country as a place of opportunity, and ultimately people will vote with their feet.
Michael Williamson, one thing that Congressman Carter brought up were cuts to FEMA that we've seen as a part of these, large-scale cuts from the federal government. I wanted to get a sense from you as to how those cuts are impacting the work United Way does. And, I'm beginning to gather you're all friends here. There's, a lot of overlap. So if anyone else wants to jump in on that front, I know that this is an issue impacting people in many industries. But Michael, let's start with you.
Well, anyone that's interacted with FEMA post-disaster knows that improvements can be made, systemic improvements can be made. But still a very, very important part of our recovery, our recovery work when we follow a natural disaster. So we certainly, support thinking about improvements. We are concerned about unintended consequences, or what I might call the baby in the bathwater moment, where, you're trying to do good, but you've maybe moved way too fast. And so, but I'm proud to say that, and I heard one of our speakers earlier mention another nonprofit. United Way of Southeast Louisiana believes in being boots on the ground and move at the speed of need. Through our unique set of pop-up relief events, we go where the need's at, and we bring resources to families, oftentimes as FEMA is working to ramp up its efforts. And then we work in concert with FEMA and other partners to ensure that the resources are getting where they're needed most, and folks know how to navigate those. That navigating like the FEMA process is very, very challenging, but we work with our civil legal aid partners to be able to help with that. So FEMA is a very, very important part of our recovery work. We certainly are concerned when there are going to be changes and not knowing how those changes are going to play out in the local communities. But irregardless, United Way and lots of our partners, many of which are here, are still going to be in the community connecting families and individuals with the resources they need, helping them navigate long-term recovery. I often say they call it long-term recovery for a reason. It's very long, it's challenging. There are lots of hurdles you have to jump through, but we always go back to the fundamental question for Alice. Folks that don't have the resources, who need the supports, need to have a FEMA, need a United Way, need other nonprofits, need our private sector partners as well, all to band together to make sure that they can be whole.
Yeah, and I would just chime in a little bit from our experience. One, I think we all echo, we would like the responsive time from FEMA to be much quicker. We have our community colleges that we look as being center of communities and be the hubs for communities, especially during or after natural disasters. And after Laura specifically, Suella is still doing some recovery, but they're making progress. But with Ida and Fletcher, we specifically always said, and I spent time at Fletcher during Ida, and said the community was not recovered until we were all recovered. And so we took that as an important aspect of, even though the college may have been recovering and we were able to offer training programs and educating individuals quickly, we wanted the institution to be a place for people to come, to feel safe, to offer resources. And we always said, until the full community is recovered, we can't let our foot off the gas from recovery. We took it so much further, even as we sat down with Board of Regents and said, let's do a pilot, a study for community colleges to become a resiliency hub. And so Fletcher's taking that opportunity to say, we're going to show the state how we can become resiliency hubs for communities so we can get people back into the workforce quickly.
Yes.
Can I soapbox for 30
course.
seconds? Okay, and go. This is a line that I got from General Honore, the Category 4, Category 5 General, and I think it speaks to this conversation. We always talk about resilience. We have to start talking much more about resistance, and that is getting to the left side. This is your left. No, your left. The left side of the disaster curve. So yes, we can talk about FEMA needs to respond faster, but much better than that is having building codes and personal balance sheets so that they don't need to respond. You know, it's like whenever a cop shows up, whether the response time is 30 seconds or 30 minutes or 3 hours, it's too late. Somebody's been hurt. And so I think a lot more of this conversation has to be about now how do we respond, how do we set up. Now, those things are important, but those things only exist because a natural disaster was turned, a natural event was turned into a disaster by poor planning from human beings. And so we have to go more to the left side.
I see. I see. Michael Mazzola, we've heard a little bit about the public and private partnerships. We'd love to get your take on the importance of those partnerships.
That is the heart of the entire Innovation Engines program that a visionary who leads the Technology and Innovation Partnerships Directorate at National Science Foundation, Dr. Irwin Gianchandani, as he says, created by act of Congress to ensure that the technology and science that the United States has been so good at developing leads to economic outcomes for our citizens through commercialization. And so the public-private partnership part of it is that is no one institution that can do that. And so I'm really excited to say that one of the most exciting things going on in innovation in the country is right here in Louisiana. And all you have to do, I'm the guy with the pieces of paper right now, is go look at also in March was a great year, the newly published strategic plan for Louisiana economic development, our incredible high-performing state economic development organization called Positioning Louisiana to Win. And in this document, they've recognized that the thing that Louisiana can add to our world-class economic development is attracting and starting intellectual property or technology-based startup companies. And so as a result of that, the NSF's relatively modest investment in our first 2 years of $15 million has already been almost tripled through a great partnership with GNO Inc., the City of New Orleans, LED, to bring a tremendous new location in the City of New Orleans that'll be led by New Lab to incubate our many tech startups that are coming out of the woodwork right now. So it's all about leveraging the community and the community decision to deal with something that is spelled out as the #1 talent issue in the state of Louisiana, which is stopping or reducing the outflow of the folks who are most likely to start companies and build wealth and increase the access of all Louisiana citizens to high-paying jobs here. So it's no secret that many of our best college-educated engineers and scientists leave to other states. But by building this innovation ecosystem here, they are going to do some of the most exciting work of their lives while staying here in Louisiana.
We only have a few minutes left, but I want to bring us back full circle. At the beginning of the panel, I mentioned we're coming up on that 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and we're at the very beginning of hurricane season of 2025. I wanted to get all of your senses as to what lessons have been learned since Hurricane Katrina when it comes to recovery, but also energy, economic development. We can go down the line. We'll start with you, Michael.
All right, well, you just heard my biggest point is that communities have to build back stronger, and resilience as a concept or as a term is not only cliche, but sometimes it's an excuse. But I also think that the lesson, and this is not just from Katrina, this could be from 9/11, this could be from the San Francisco earthquake, is that when you have these great disjointed tragedies, one of the ways that you honor the people who suffered and who were lost is by building back something that is better than what was there before. And so I think it's possible to be responding in a way that is compassionate and effective, but at the same time trying to rebuild an infrastructure that improves. So an example here is our $15 billion flood protection system, so that if a Katrina came tomorrow, it would have no impact. We fix that. Or in terms of 9/11, downtown Manhattan is actually a much more functional and better 24/7 community now because it's been replanned in the aftermath of that disaster. So there is actually opportunity and hope in these great tragedies.
Michael Williamson.
So yeah, that's a tough one. But so on the anniversary of Katrina this year, we will celebrate helping 400 families achieve homeownership. Families that would have not have been able to do that without the support of the community. You know, we have many of our public and private partners. But the reason we got there is because Katrina revealed an ugly truth, that the poverty and financial instability in this state led to unequal recovery. And so we doubled down on that. And so I'm excited about the future because we've learned a lot in 20 years around what does it take to help families achieve a level of financial stability. Now pairing it with all the above strategy, all the things we've talked about today, doing all those things together at once consistently can allow us to accelerate that. 20 years is a long time. 400 homes seems like a lot, but imagine if we did it faster and if we did it better. And we'll get there because we have all the right, I often talk about we're doing all the right things, we're not doing them at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so certainly excited about what we learned, but I think we have a real opportunity. And I think it will take us 20 years to do that same number because we all understand what has to happen next.
Chandler.
Yeah, for us, it's if we respond during or after it's too late. It's making sure that we have upskilled and trained many, if not thousands, of individuals who you would consider working in a first responder space. So whether that's healthcare, line workers, repairers, construction, et cetera. So for us, it's making sure that those programs continue to thrive and that we're able to train and educate them, those individuals now, so that they're able to supply that workforce immediately during and after response, so we aren't waiting for help.
Michael Mazzola.
Well, I'm struck by Michael Heck's comment about the balance sheet. And I think that it's now recognized around the country that having a support for not just bringing in employers, but also allowing folks to build their own businesses will lead to upward social mobility and an incredible opportunity for folks to be resilient themselves.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for this panel. Michael ×3 and Chandler, thank you again. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. It's like a boy band.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you to all our wonderful speakers this morning. That brings us to the end of our program. On the behalf of the Hill and our sponsor, Entergy, we'd like to thank everyone who joined us here today in person, as well as those of you that tuned in online. If you missed any portion of today's discussion, the full event video is available on thehill.com. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.